The laughter hit first, sharp and careless, rolling across the arena like it had been waiting for permission. The lights were already hot, white and blinding, pointed toward the center of the stage where Roxanne Vale swayed on her heels, gripping a microphone like it owed her money. Music bled from the speakers in uneven bursts as the band tried to keep up with her mood. At the edge of the stage, a man in burnt orange work coveralls froze mid-step, one hand tight on a mop handle, his other fist closing slowly at his side as every eye in the building turned toward him. Roxanne leaned forward, smiling wide, her voice cutting clean through the noise. "Hey," she said, dragging the word out, pointing straight at him. "You, mop guy." The crowd roared again, louder this time, feeding on her tone. The man didn't move. His boots were planted on the polished floor, his shoulders stiff, his head slightly bowed. He wasn't part of the show. He wasn't supposed to exist. But the camera swung his way anyway, the big screen behind the stage catching his face in brutal detail. "You sing, don't you?" Roxanne asked, her voice sweet and sharp at the same time. She took a step closer, the microphone dangling loose from her fingers. The crowd leaned in, sensing blood. The man swallowed and shook his head once, slow and clear. He kept his eyes down. He knew how this worked. Stay quiet. Finish the job. Go home. But Roxanne laughed, turning toward the audience like they were old friends. "Every janitor sings when nobody's watching," she said. "Right?" The laughter spiked, then cracked. Phones lifted higher. Someone near the front whistled. The man felt heat climb his neck as his name echoed in his head. Useless now. Caleb Rourke. That was all he was. A worker with a badge clipped to his chest, a shift ending in 40 minutes, and a body caught in a place where power liked to show itself. He thought of the exit doors behind him. He thought of walking away. But Roxanne stepped closer again, close enough that he could smell alcohol on her breath. "Come on," she said, her smile thinning. "One song. Or are you scared?" Her words slid through the arena and landed hard. The laughter dipped into a hush. Caleb's chest tightened. This wasn't about music. This was about being small in front of strangers. He glanced up for the first time and saw rows of faces, thousands of them, waiting for him to fold, waiting for him to give them something to laugh at on the ride home. By the fifth paragraph, the tension had turned thick enough to press against the walls. "Welcome to Sunshine's home. Drop in the comments where you're watching from and how's the weather over there. I'm curious to know how you're faring." Because Roxanne wasn't done yet. She laughed again, louder, and reached out, her hand closing around Caleb's forearm. The touch wasn't gentle. It wasn't friendly. It was ownership. "Relax," she said into the mic. "Let's hear what minimum wage sounds like." The words landed wrong. Even the crowd felt it. The noise dropped off in pieces, claps stopping midair, cheers turning into murmurs. Somewhere near the side of the stage, security shifted, but didn't step in. No one wanted to be the one to shut her down. Caleb looked out again, his heart thudding against his ribs. He saw people filming. He saw people smiling. He saw a few faces change, brows pulling tight, mouths pressing flat. He thought of his twin boys at home, Noah and Eli, asleep in bunk beds with mismatched blankets. He thought of bills spread across the kitchen table. He thought of how fast a moment like this could follow him forever. Walking away would be easy. Staying would cost him something he wasn't sure he could afford. Roxanne shoved the microphone into his hand. "Sing," she said, her voice flat now, daring him to refuse. The band fell silent. The conductor looked confused, his hands hovering in the air. The lights stayed locked on. Caleb's fingers trembled around the mic, the metal cool against his palm. He felt his knees threaten to give. He could hear his own breathing, fast and uneven, loud inside his head. He closed his eyes because it was the only thing he could control. The first sound he made wasn't loud. It wasn't bold. It was clean. A single note, steady and held, sliding out into the quiet like a confession. The room reacted before anyone could stop it. The laughter died on contact. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone near the back stopped recording. Roxanne's smile faltered, just for a second, before she covered it with a laugh and a shake of her head. Caleb kept going. The second note carried more weight. drawn from somewhere deeper than his chest. He wasn't thinking about the crowd anymore. He wasn't thinking about Roxanne. He was thinking about nights whispering songs into the dark so two small boys could sleep. He was thinking about breathing slow so the house wouldn't creak. The band glanced at each other, then followed him, soft at first, careful not to break what was happening. By the time he reached the first chorus, the room had changed. People leaned forward without knowing why. Hands lowered. Mouths stayed closed. The sound coming from Caleb wasn't flashy. It didn't chase applause. It sat in the space and refused to move. Roxanne stepped in, lifting her mic, trying to layer her voice over his. She missed the note. Tried again. Missed it worse. Her laugh came out sharp, too quick. Caleb didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He felt the shift, felt the balance tilt. He hit a note she skipped, holding it long enough for the truth to settle. A few people wiped at their eyes. The conductor dropped his hands, stunned. Roxanne's face hardened, her jaw tight, her eyes bright with anger she couldn't hide. The song pushed forward anyway, carrying Caleb with it. When he reached the bridge, the arena was silent. Not the kind of silence that waits to laugh, but the kind that listens. Caleb's voice didn't shake now. It filled the room, steady and sure, shaped by years of choosing quiet over noise. Roxanne tried to interrupt again, stepping closer, her voice cracking against his. It didn't work. The crowd heard the difference. They felt it. The final note hovered, stretched thin, then settled. Caleb lowered the microphone, his chest rising and falling hard as the last sound faded. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Roxanne stood frozen beside him, exposed under the lights, her power slipping through her fingers. Then, somewhere in the dark, a single clap broke free. Another followed, and another. The noise swelled fast, rolling toward the stage like a wave Caleb hadn't seen coming. He turned slightly, blinded by the lights, unsure where to go, unsure what he had just done. The applause kept rising, and Roxanne's smile was gone for good now, replaced by something sharp and quiet. As Caleb took his first step back toward the shadows, the camera zoomed in on her face, and the crowd roared louder. Not for her, but for him. And that was the moment she decided this wasn't over yet. The applause didn't stop when Caleb stepped off the center of the stage. It followed him, uneven and loud, chasing his back as he moved toward the darker edge where cables lay coiled and crew members stood frozen in place. He could feel the sound in his chest, heavy and confusing. Not warm the way people like to describe it. It felt more like pressure, like the room had closed in and didn't know how to open back up. His hands shook again. Worse now, the microphone still warm from his grip as a stagehand finally took it from him without meeting his eyes. Roxanne Vale stayed where she was, her body stiff, her head tilted slightly as if she were listening for something only she could hear. The lights kept her trapped in their glare. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She scanned the crowd, searching for the kind of control she was used to finding without effort. It wasn't there. The noise belonged to someone else now. That realization landed slow, and when it did, her lips pressed into a thin line that cameras caught from every angle. Caleb reached the side curtain and stopped. He didn't know where to go next. No one had told him. His job wasn't on the schedule past that moment. He stood with his back half turned to the stage, the roar of the crowd still rolling, and stared down at the floor like it might give him instructions. A security guard brushed past him, eyes wide, speaking fast into a headset. Another crew member laughed under his breath, shaking his head like he'd just seen something he couldn't explain. From the corner of his eye, Caleb saw Roxanne move. She took 2 steps forward, lifting her microphone again. The applause thinned, confused. Her voice cut through, sharper than before. Okay, she said, forcing a laugh. We get it. She gestured toward the side of the stage, toward him. Let's hear it for our surprise guest. A few claps followed, scattered and unsure. It wasn't enough. She felt it, and her jaw tightened. Caleb didn't turn around. He couldn't. If he faced her again, he wasn't sure what would come out of his mouth, and he didn't trust it to stay quiet. His heart was still racing, his breath shallow. He thought the moment might end if he stayed still long enough. Moments always ended. They had to. But this one stretched, pulling thin threads behind it. The band waited, hands hovering over strings and keys. The conductor glanced between Roxanne and the side curtain, uncertain. The crowd buzzed, a low, restless sound replacing the cheers. Phones lifted again, but now they weren't aimed just at the star. They followed Caleb's outline in the shadows, hungry for whatever came next. He felt exposed even with his back turned, like the light could find him anywhere. Roxanne cleared her throat. "All right," she said. "Back to the show." She snapped her fingers at the band. They started the next track, but it came in rough, out of sync. Her voice joined, loud and fast, pushing ahead of the beat. She oversang the first line, reaching too hard. A few people near the front exchanged looks. Someone laughed, then stopped when no one else joined in. Caleb took a step farther back, nearly bumping into a rack of equipment. A stage manager caught his arm, steadying him. "You okay?" the man asked quietly. Caleb nodded even though he wasn't sure. The manager hesitated, then leaned in closer. "You should probably stay here for a second," he said. "Things are weird." Caleb nodded again. Weird felt like an understatement. On stage, Roxanne missed another note. This time it was clear. A ripple moved through the crowd, subtle but real. She adjusted her grip on the microphone, laughing it off, pacing harder, louder. She threw her free hand into the air, demanding energy. Some people responded out of habit, others didn't. The sound didn't rise the way it was supposed to. It broke apart. Caleb watched from the side now, unable to look away. He felt a strange pull in his chest, a mix of guilt and something else he didn't want to name. He hadn't planned any of this. He hadn't wanted it. He thought of his boys again, their faces soft in sleep, and wondered if this night would reach them somehow, through screens and voices that didn't care who got hurt along the way. Roxanne shot a glance toward the side curtain. It was quick, but Caleb saw it. Her eyes found him, sharp and bright. The song faltered for half a beat. She recovered fast, but the crack was there. The crowd felt it too. A few boos slipped out, isolated at first, then swallowed by confusion. Roxanne finished the song with a flourish that landed flat. The applause that followed was polite, thin, nothing like before. She stood center stage, breathing hard, her chest rising fast. "You good?" she asked the crowd, forcing cheer into her voice. The response came back mixed, uneven. She laughed again, too loud. All right, let's keep it moving." She turned, pointing toward the side. "You!" she called out, her voice carrying. "You still there?" Caleb's stomach dropped. The stage manager stiffened beside him. "Don't," the man muttered, more to himself than to Caleb. The crowd shifted, sensing another collision. Cameras swung back toward the shadows. Caleb felt his feet root to the floor. He didn't want to go back out there. He also didn't want to run. Both choices felt heavy. Roxanne walked closer to the edge of the stage, her heels striking hard. "Come on," she said, her tone light but tight underneath. "People loved you." A few cheers rose, louder than before, emboldened by her words. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Let's give them a little more." Caleb shook his head once. Slow, clear. The crowd reacted, a sound like a breath pulled in all at once. Roxanne's smile froze. For a moment no one spoke. The band waited again. The lights stayed locked. "Seriously?" Roxanne said, her voice dropping. She took another step forward. "Don't get shy now." Her words carried a warning. The crowd leaned in, caught between excitement and discomfort. Caleb felt the weight of the room press down on him again, heavier than before. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't trust himself to speak. Roxanne laughed, short and sharp. "Fine," she said. She turned back toward the crowd, lifting her mic. "Guess some people can't handle the spotlight." A few people laughed with her. Others didn't. The division was clear now, a line drawn right down the middle of the room. Caleb exhaled slowly, his hands unclenched at his sides. He thought this might be it. He thought the moment might finally pass. Then Roxanne added, almost offhand, "Shame, though. Sounded like you had something to prove." Her eyes flicked toward him again. The challenge hung in the air, heavy and unfinished. The crowd buzzed louder, caught on the edge of something they couldn't name. Caleb felt his chest tighten as the stage manager's grip on his arm loosened. No one pulled him back. No one pushed him forward. The choice hovered, waiting. And somewhere in the middle of that noise and light, Caleb realized the night wasn't done with him yet. The crowd didn't cheer this time. It shifted. The sound moved like a single body adjusting its weight, restless and alert. Caleb felt it without turning around. He felt the air tighten, the way it does right before a storm breaks, when everyone senses that something is about to tip and no one knows which way. Roxanne stood at the edge of the stage, her heel tapping once against the wood, her patience thinning in plain sight. "Don't just stand there," she said, her voice lighter than her eyes. "If you're done, you can go." A few laughs followed, unsure, scattered. The words sounded like permission, but they were bait. Caleb knew that tone. He'd heard it before in other places, other jobs, when someone wanted power without looking like they were taking it. He took a slow breath and stayed where he was. The pause stretched. The band members glanced at one another again, fingers hovering uselessly. The conductor's shoulders sagged, then stiffened, like he was bracing for impact. Somewhere in the stands, a man shouted, "Let him sing!" Another voice answered back, "Let her finish!" The room split itself in half, lines drawn by instinct. Roxanne's smile flickered. She lifted her mic again. "See?" she said to the crowd. "You start something. People want more." She turned her head just enough to catch Caleb in her side vision. "You want more?" Caleb's heart hammered. He could hear his pulse in his ears, loud and uneven. He thought of the stage lights, how they burned without caring who stood under them. He thought of the exit doors again, the cool dark beyond them. He could leave. He was allowed to leave. But his feet didn't move. They felt heavier now, planted by something deeper than fear. "I didn't ask for this," he said quietly. The words barely carried past the monitors, but the front rows caught them. A ripple moved outward. Roxanne laughed, sharp. "Nobody ever does," she replied. "That's how the world works." She stepped back, lifting her chin. "You want to sing, sing. You don't. Either way, the show goes on." The band waited for her cue. The lights stayed locked. The cameras didn't look away. Caleb felt the weight of the microphone again, even though it wasn't in his hand anymore. He realized something then, standing half in shadow, half in light. This wasn't about whether he could sing. That question had already been answered. This was about who got to decide what that moment meant, who owned it, who controlled the story when the noise died down. He turned back toward the stage. The movement drew a reaction from the crowd, a sharp intake of breath. Phones lifted higher. Roxanne's eyebrows rose just slightly. She didn't move. She watched him like a gambler watching the last card slide across the table. Caleb stepped forward, 1 foot at a time, his boots loud against the floor in the sudden quiet. He didn't reach for the microphone. He didn't ask. He stopped a few feet away and looked straight at her. "I'm not here to be part of your show," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I was just doing my job." A murmur rolled through the stands. Roxanne tilted her head, studying him. "Then do it," she said. "Or don't. But don't act like I dragged you up here." She spread her hands wide, playing to the cameras. "You walked back out." Caleb nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "I did." For a second, it looked like she might say something else. Her mouth opened, then closed. She waved her hand toward the band. "Fine," she said. "Hit it." The music started again, loud and fast, filling the space she left behind as she turned away from him. The crowd reacted out of habit, cheers rising in waves that didn't quite crest. Caleb stood there, the sound washing over him. He felt out of place, a wrong piece on the board. He should step back again. He knew that. But the music didn't push him away the way it had before. It circled him, brushed past him. He listened without meaning to, his body remembering things his mind tried to forget. Roxanne launched into the verse, her voice strong but rushed. She leaned into the beat, chasing it instead of riding it. The crowd clapped along, some eager, some distracted. Caleb watched her sing and noticed the strain this time, the way she skipped the top of a phrase and punched through the bottom instead. It was small. Most people wouldn't catch it. He did. He didn't plan what happened next. There was no decision point, no speech in his head. When the chorus came back around, his mouth opened on its own. He sang low under the music, not into a mic, not for the crowd. Just enough to hear himself, just enough to breathe. The sound surprised him. It surprised the people closest to the stage, too. A few heads turned, a woman near the front frowned, then leaned toward her friend. Caleb kept singing, quiet and steady, filling the space as Roxanne rushed through. He wasn't trying to compete. He wasn't trying to be heard. He was finishing something that had been left hanging. The band felt it before they understood it. The drummer eased back without thinking, giving space. The bass softened, sliding into the pocket Caleb found. The conductor's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. Roxanne stumbled on a word, then recovered, her voice jumping ahead again. She shot a look over her shoulder. "Hey!" she snapped between lines. "What are you doing?" Caleb didn't answer. He couldn't without stopping. He kept singing, his voice threading through the music like it belonged there. The crowd noticed now. The sound in the room shifted again, less scattered, more focused. Phones swung back toward him, catching his face lit from below by the stage lights. Roxanne turned fully this time, her voice faltering as she lost her place. "Stop," she said, sharp and clear. The band hesitated. The music wavered, then dropped out completely, leaving Caleb's voice alone in the open air. He froze for half a beat, startled by the silence he'd created. He could stop. He knew that. The room waited. Roxanne stared at him, her expression hard, her grip tight on the microphone. "I said stop," she repeated, her voice cracking just a little on the last word. Caleb swallowed. The note he'd been holding trembled, then steadied. He finished the line, soft but sure, and let it fall. The sound faded naturally, no force, no push. The silence that followed felt different from before. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't hungry. It was full. Someone clapped, then another, a third. The noise spread faster this time, louder, more certain. Roxanne stood still, her face flushed, her chest rising fast. She lifted her mic, but nothing came out at first. When she tried again, her voice broke, thin against the roar. "This isn't funny," she said, trying to laugh. The crowd didn't answer her. They were watching Caleb now, watching the way he stood there, shoulders squared, eyes calm, like he'd found his balance in the middle of the storm. He didn't smile. He didn't bow. He didn't ask for anything. Roxanne took a step toward him, lowering her voice. "You think you won?" she hissed, the mic angled away from her mouth. "You don't know what you're doing." Caleb met her eyes. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he said quietly. The cameras caught it anyway, the words reading clear on his lips. A hush rippled through the crowd, anticipation tightening again. Roxanne's face changed, anger flashing through the shine. She straightened and turned back toward the audience, lifting her mic high. "All right," she said, her voice loud and bright, forced into place. "You want a duet?" Cheers erupted, some excited, some uneasy. She smiled wide, daring him. "Let's see if you can keep up." The band waited for the cue. The lights burned hotter. Caleb felt the choice settle heavy in his chest. This wasn't an accident anymore. This was a line. He took a slow breath, nodding once, not to her, but to himself. The first note of the next song rang out, and as the crowd leaned forward again, Caleb stepped fully into the light, knowing that whatever came next would leave marks neither of them could erase. The lights shifted without warning, brighter and tighter, locking Caleb and Roxanne into the same frame. The band held the opening note, waiting for the count that didn't come. The crowd leaned forward, the sound of thousands of people breathing at once, filling the space between beats. Roxanne lifted her chin, smiling for the cameras, but her eyes stayed fixed on Caleb like she was measuring him. "Don't freeze up now," she said into the mic, her voice carrying easy across the arena. "You wanted this." Caleb didn't answer. He stood still, shoulders squared, hands loose at his sides. The heat from the lights pressed down on him, familiar in a way that surprised him. He'd felt this before. Not this room, not this crowd, but this moment where everything narrowed and the noise fell away. He drew in a slow breath, counting it without thinking, the way his body remembered how to do long before his mind caught up. The band came in soft. Too soft for a stadium, a murmur rippled through the crowd, confused by the restraint. Roxanne jumped in fast, her voice loud and sharp, grabbing for attention. Caleb waited. He didn't rush her. He didn't chase the sound. He let her run ahead. As she pushed through the verse, the room filled with flashes that didn't belong to the stage. A small kitchen lit by a single bulb. Two bowls of cereal on a table with one leg shorter than the others. The sound of a cartoon playing too loud because the remote was broken. Caleb's breath stayed steady as he listened. The song pulling memories loose whether he wanted them or not. He'd stood on stages before. Smaller ones, quieter ones. Rooms where the applause was polite and the checks were thin but honest. He'd sung behind other people's voices, filling in what they couldn't reach, smoothing edges so stars could shine without strain. He never stood at the center. He didn't want to. Center meant risk. Center meant promises he couldn't always keep. The chorus came back around. Roxanne leaned into it again, overshooting, her voice scraping the top. Caleb stepped in then, clean and controlled, taking the line she skipped and holding it just long enough for the sound to settle. The crowd reacted with a low noise, something between surprise and recognition. Roxanne shot him a look and laughed, sharp and quick, as if to say she planned it that way. Caleb kept singing. The lights blurred for a second, and the arena faded into a hospital room that smelled like cleaner and fear. A bed too big for the body in it. Machines blinking in quiet rhythm. A woman's hand in his, light as paper, her voice barely there. He hadn't sung that night. He'd promised he would later when she felt better, when they got home. Later never came. The band followed him without being told. The conductor stopped looking at Roxanne and watched Caleb instead, eyes wide, hands steady. The music shifted, slower now, deeper. The crowd felt it and leaned in, drawn by something they couldn't name. Caleb's mind drifted to the night he packed his life into boxes that didn't quite fit, to the phone call he didn't want to answer, the one that told him the touring job was still his if he wanted it. He'd looked at two small faces asleep on a couch that smelled like old fabric and formula and said no without thinking. He didn't explain it to anyone. He didn't need to. The answer lived in his chest. Roxanne missed another word. She recovered fast, but the gap showed. Her smile tightened. She paced harder, trying to pull the room back to her. The crowd clapped along out of habit, but their eyes stayed on Caleb. He could feel it now, the attention settling on him like weight. He didn't reach for it. He held his ground. The song dipped into the bridge, quieter, exposed. Roxanne hesitated, just a fraction too long. Caleb stepped forward, his voice dropping, wrapping around the melody like it knew where to go. The arena went still. People stopped moving. Phones lowered again. The sound coming from him wasn't loud enough to impress anyone who came looking for tricks. It didn't need to be. He saw Noah's face in his mind, serious and careful, lips moving as he practiced sounds that didn't come easy. He saw Eli counting his breaths when his chest got tight, trusting his dad to stay calm. Caleb sang the way he sang for them, measured and patient, letting each note land where it belonged. Roxanne tried to come in over him and failed. Her voice cracked on the entry. She laughed it off, but the laugh didn't travel. The crowd heard the difference now. They felt the strain in her sound, the effort it took. They felt the ease in his. Caleb didn't look at her. He stayed focused on the space just above the first row, where the lights softened enough that he could almost see faces again. He finished the bridge and let the music breathe before the final chorus. The band swelled behind him, confident now, locked in. Roxanne stood still, her mic lowered for half a beat too long. Her eyes darted, searching for help that didn't come. When she joined back in, it was late. The harmony didn't settle. The crowd shifted, restless but hooked, caught between tension and release. Caleb felt the end coming. He felt the shape of it in his chest, the way you feel a wave before it breaks. He thought of the boys asleep, of mornings rushed and quiet victories no one clapped for. He thought of floors scrubbed clean after crowds left, of nights spent invisible on purpose. He sang the last line like he was setting something down, not throwing it. The final note hung for a second, thin and clear, then faded. Silence followed, deep and wide. No one moved. Roxanne stared at him, her face flushed, her mouth slightly open. She lifted her mic, then stopped. The room didn't belong to her anymore. A clap broke the stillness. Then another. The sound grew, faster and louder, until the arena rose as one. Caleb stood there, stunned, his ears ringing, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. He hadn't planned this. He hadn't chased it. It found him anyway. Roxanne stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You don't know what you just did," she said, her smile gone, replaced by something tight and sharp. The crowd roared around them, drowning out everything else. Caleb met her eyes steady. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The band waited. The lights burned. And somewhere between the noise and the silence, the truth settled into the room, heavy and undeniable, as Roxanne realized she was standing on a stage she no longer controlled. The applause didn't fade the way Roxanne expected it to. It stayed loud, uneven, alive, rolling back and forth across the arena as if the crowd couldn't decide where to land. Caleb stood still in the center of it, the sound pressing against his ears, his chest rising fast as he tried to understand what had just happened. His hands hung at his sides, fingers numb, like they belonged to someone else. Roxanne forced a laugh and lifted her microphone, waving for the noise to settle. It took longer than she was used to. When she finally spoke, her voice came out bright but thin. "Okay," she said. "Okay, that was cute." A few laughs followed, late and unsure. She nodded toward Caleb like he was part of the stage design. "Let's give it up for our janitor with a dream." The words landed wrong. The crowd reacted with a low sound, not laughter this time, not cheers either. Something in between. Caleb felt it shift again, the way power moved without asking permission. He looked out and saw faces that weren't smiling now. Faces studying Roxanne instead of him. Roxanne noticed too. Her grip tightened on the mic. She stepped closer to Caleb, her heels clicking sharp against the floor. "You think you're special?" she asked, lowering her voice so it barely carried past the first rows. "You think one song makes you something?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He could feel his heart in his throat, could feel the weight of the room waiting on him again. But this time it felt different. The fear was still there, but it wasn't alone. Something steadier sat beside it. He shook his head once. "I don't think anything," he said. "I was just singing." Roxanne scoffed and turned back to the crowd. "You hear that?" she said, laughing too loud. "Just singing." She spread her arms wide. "That's all it takes now?" Her voice rose, sharp edges cutting through the air. "May anybody with a mop gets a moment?" A few boos broke out, scattered but clear. Roxanne's smile faltered for half a second before she masked it. She waved a hand like she was brushing dust away. "Relax," she said. "I'm having fun. You're having fun." She looked straight into the camera and winked. "This is what live music looks like." Behind the scenes, things moved fast. A stage manager spoke urgently into a headset. Security shifted closer to the steps. The conductor glanced between them, sweat beating at his temple. The band stayed ready, uncertain who to follow. Caleb caught sight of a man near the side of the stage holding a phone to his ear, his face pale. He didn't know why that detail stuck, but it did. He felt the room tightening again, not with excitement, but with strain. Roxanne turned back to him, stepping into his space. "You want another one?" she asked, her tone daring him. "Since you've got so much to say." Caleb hesitated. He hadn't planned to sing again. He hadn't planned any of this. He thought of Noah struggling over words at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed in focus. He thought of Eli counting breaths on the couch. He thought of promises made quietly and kept without witnesses. He lifted his chin slightly. "No," he said. The word carried farther than he expected. The crowd reacted instantly, a rush of sound rolling forward. Roxanne's eyes widened, then narrowed. "No," she repeated, laughing sharply. "You don't get to say no up here." She leaned in, her voice low and tight. "You came back out. That means you play along." Caleb met her gaze. "I already did," he said. For a moment she looked like she might snap back, might tear into him right there. Instead, she straightened and smiled again, wide and polished. "All right," she said, turning to the band. "Let's take it up." She snapped her fingers hard. "Big ending." The music started loud this time, too loud, crashing into the space like it was meant to drown something out. Roxanne sang over it, pushing her voice hard, chasing volume. The crowd clapped along out of habit, but the rhythm felt forced. The ease was gone. Caleb stepped back, closer to the shadows. He didn't want to be in the light anymore. He'd said what he needed to say. He felt empty now, wrung out. He watched Roxanne perform and saw the cracks she couldn't hide, the strain around her mouth, the way her breath came short. The crowd saw it too. Their claps lagged. Their cheers came late. Halfway through the song, Roxanne missed another note, badly this time. A sharp sound cut through the music. She laughed it off, but the laughter didn't carry. Someone near the front shook their head. A few people booed, louder now. Roxanne's face hardened. She paced harder, moving closer to the edge of the stage, pointing the mic toward the crowd, demanding noise. "Sing!" she shouted. Some voices joined, many didn't. Caleb felt a hand touch his arm. It was the stage manager again. "Stay here," the man said quietly. "Just stay." Caleb nodded. His stomach twisted. He had a feeling this night was about to tip again. Roxanne finished the song with a flourish that didn't land. The applause that followed was thin, broken by scattered boos. She stood there breathing hard, eyes darting. She looked toward the side of the stage, straight at Caleb. And something changed in her expression. Calculation replaced anger. She lifted the mic slowly. "You know what?" she said, forcing a laugh. "Let's be real for a second." The crowd quieted, curious. "This guy," she pointed at Caleb, "he didn't just show up tonight." Murmurs rippled through the stands. "You don't walk on stage like that unless you want attention." Caleb stiffened. He felt the shift immediately. This wasn't teasing. This was a turn. "He knew exactly what he was doing," Roxanne continued. "And I'll tell you why." She smiled again, but there was no warmth in it now. "Because some people will do anything for 5 minutes of fame." The crowd reacted, voices rising in protest and agreement at the same time. The room split again. Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it. He realized what she was doing. She wasn't trying to win the crowd back. She was trying to change the story. Roxanne took a step closer to the edge, lowering her voice for effect. "You want the truth?" she asked. "This isn't some poor janitor moment. This is a setup." Gasps broke out. Cameras zoomed tighter. "I've seen this before," she went on. "People pretending to be something they're not." Caleb felt heat rush to his face. His chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with anger he had nowhere to put. He shook his head slowly. "That's not true," he said, his voice barely caring. Roxanne laughed. "Of course you'd say that," she replied. She turned back to the crowd. "Ask yourselves," she said, "how many janitors do you know who can sing like that?" The question hung heavy. Caleb realized then that this wasn't about music anymore. It wasn't even about him. It was about control, about who got to decide what the truth looked like when millions were watching. He felt small again, not because he was wrong, but because the room was dangerous now. The crowd buzzed louder, tension thick in the air. Some shouted for him, others shouted back. Security edged closer to the stage. The band fell silent, instruments hanging uselessly. Roxanne turned toward Caleb one last time, her smile gone completely. "You opened a door," she said quietly, her words lost to the crowd but clear to him. "Don't act surprised by what comes through it." Caleb stood frozen, the noise crashing around him, knowing the night had crossed into something he couldn't sing his way out of. And as the cameras rolled and the crowd waited for the next blow, he understood that the real test hadn't even started yet. The shout cut through the arena without warning. "That's a lie!" It came from the lower seats, loud enough to turn heads, sharp enough to stop the noise mid-rise. Caleb felt the words hit before he understood them. Roxanne froze where she stood, one hand gripping the microphone. The other still pointed in his direction, as if she could hold the story in place by force alone. The crowd shifted again, faster this time. Phones swung toward the voice. A man stood up 2 rows from the front, his face tight, his jaw set. "He didn't set anything up," the man said. "I work here. I saw him cleaning before doors open." Murmurs spread, quick and uneven. Roxanne laughed, short and brittle, shaking her head like the interruption amused her. "Oh, we've got witnesses now," she said, smiling wide for the cameras. "Amazing." She turned slightly, angling her body to block the man from view. "Everybody's an expert when a camera's on." But the room didn't follow her lead. The sound didn't settle. Another voice called out from higher up. He was mopping during sound check. Then another. I saw him too. The noise layered, no longer cheering or booing, but stacking facts on top of each other in real time. Caleb stood where he was, heart pounding, his mind racing to catch up. He hadn't planned this. He hadn't asked anyone to speak for him. He felt exposed again, but in a different way. The truth was moving now, and it wasn't waiting for permission. Roxanne lifted her mic, her smile tight. Okay, she said, drawing the word out. Let's all calm down. She turned toward Caleb, her eyes sharp. You want to explain why you're even here? The question landed heavy. Thousands of eyes swung back to him. Caleb swallowed. He could feel the old urge rise, the one that told him to stay quiet, to shrink, to let louder voices decide the shape of the moment. His hands clenched, then loosened. He took a breath and spoke into the open air, not shouting, not pushing. I work here, he said. I clean this place at night. The simplicity of it surprised him. That's it. The crowd reacted, a low sound rolling forward, not satisfied but listening. Roxanne laughed again, louder, pacing a few steps. You hear that? She said. Just a cleaner. And yet, she gestured toward the audience. You all lost your minds 5 minutes ago. She stopped in front of him, lowering her voice. You think that happens by accident? Caleb met her gaze. Yeah, he said, I do. The answer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't clever. It landed anyway. The band stayed silent. The conductor didn't move. The lights burned hot, trapping them both in the center. Roxanne stared at him, her mouth opening, then closing as if she'd expected something else. From the side of the stage, a stage manager stepped forward, speaking into a headset, his eyes fixed on Roxanne. She waved him off without looking. I've got this, she snapped, then turned back to the crowd. You want the truth? She asked, her voice rising. Here's the truth. Nobody gets this good without wanting attention. Nobody. A few boos broke out, louder now, more certain. Roxanne flinched, then recovered, lifting her chin. Fine, she said. Let's talk about attention. She pointed the mic toward Caleb again. What's your name? Caleb hesitated, then answered. Caleb. Caleb, she repeated, tasting it. Caleb what? Caleb Rourke. The name echoed through the speakers. Phones typed it instantly. Caleb felt a strange calm settle in his chest. There was no taking it back now. Roxanne nodded slowly. So, Caleb Rourke, she said, you just happen to know how to sing like that. She laughed again. You expect us to believe that? Caleb shook his head. I don't expect anything. The crowd reacted to that, louder than before. Someone shouted, Let him talk! Another voice answered, Let her finish! The divide sharpened. Security edged closer. The stage manager looked ready to step in. Roxanne lifted her hand. You know what? She said. I'm done playing games. She leaned closer to Caleb, her mic angled away, her voice low but clear enough for the front rows. You embarrassed me out here. Her eyes burned. And I don't forget that. Caleb felt the words settle, heavy and real. He nodded once. I didn't mean to, he said, but I won't lie either. That did it. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not in boos, but in something louder and messier. Shouts crossed over each other. People stood. Phones waved. The noise swallowed the stage whole. Roxanne stepped back, her smile gone, replaced by something tight and exposed. Behind them, the big screen flickered. A replay rolled without warning. Caleb's first note, the hush, the shift. The clip looped, caught by the house feed before anyone could stop it. The crowd reacted instantly, pointing, shouting, reacting to the proof unfolding above them. Roxanne turned toward the screen, her face draining of color. Cut that, she snapped, her voice lost in the noise. No one moved. Caleb watched his own image on the screen, stunned. He saw himself standing there, still and steady, singing without looking back. He didn't recognize the man entirely, but he understood him. That man wasn't chasing anything. He was answering something. The applause returned, stronger now, more unified. It rolled toward the stage in a wave that lifted people to their feet. Roxanne stood in the center of it, trapped, her microphone lowered at her side. For the first time all night, she had nothing to say. Caleb took a step back, then another, toward the edge of the stage. No one stopped him. The noise followed him, loud and real. As he reached the shadows again, he felt the weight of the moment pressed down, not like fear, but like consequence. He knew this wasn't over. The truth had entered the room, and it wasn't leaving quietly. The screen froze on his face one last time before going dark. The crowd roared again. And somewhere in the chaos, Caleb understood that whatever came next would not be decided by music alone. The lights snapped off without warning. Not all of them, just enough to throw the stage into a hard contrast of shadow and glare. The crowd gasped as one, the sound sharp and quick, like a single breath pulled too fast. Caleb stopped walking. The roar didn't fade, but it changed, turning restless, edged with confusion. Somewhere near the front, someone shouted his name. Someone else shouted Roxanne's. A spotlight cut back on, locking on to the center of the stage. Roxanne stood there alone. Her shoulders were tight, her posture stiff, the microphone hanging low in her hand. She looked smaller under the light, stripped of movement, stripped of noise. For a split second, she didn't look angry. She looked cornered. The band stayed frozen. The conductor didn't raise his hands. Security lined the steps but didn't climb them. Everyone was waiting to see who would move first. Roxanne lifted the mic slowly. "All right," she said, her voice carrying, controlled again. "Let's reset." She smiled, the practiced one, the smile people recognized. This got out of hand. A few people booed. Others stayed quiet. "We're here to have a good night," she continued, "not to tear anybody down." The words landed flat. Caleb stood at the edge of the light, half seen, half hidden. He felt the pull again, the same pressure that had dragged him forward before. He didn't want it. He didn't trust it. He stayed where he was. Roxanne glanced toward him. Her smile slipped, just a little. "Caleb," she said, softening her tone, "come back up here." She held the mic away from her mouth, letting the crowd react. Cheers broke out, loud and sudden. "Let's finish this right," she added. "Together." Caleb felt every eye turn on him again. His chest tightened. He thought of walking away, of slipping into the dark and letting the noise burn itself out without him. He could still do that. No one was stopping him. But he also felt something else now, something heavier than fear. Responsibility. Not to the crowd, to himself. He stepped forward. The reaction hit immediately. The crowd surged to its feet, the sound crashing forward in a wave that made the floor tremble. Phones lifted high. Caleb walked back into the light, slower this time, steady. Roxanne watched him approach, her expression unreadable. She lowered her voice as he came close. "You don't have to do this," she said, her lips barely moving. "You already got your moment." She smiled again, quick and tight. "Walk away. People will forget." Caleb shook his head. "I won't," he said. Her eyes flashed. "You think you're some kind of hero now?" "No," he replied. "I just won't lie." Roxanne straightened, turning back to the crowd. "You hear that?" she said, laughing lightly. "He's got principles." A few people laughed with her. More didn't. "All right," she said. "Let's put it to rest." She lifted her mic higher. "One last song." The band hesitated. The conductor looked uncertain, then nodded. The opening chord rang out, low and slow, a song everyone knew. The crowd recognized it instantly, cheering, ready. Roxanne turned slightly toward Caleb, her smile returning. "You know this one?" she asked. Caleb nodded once. "Good," she said. "Then sing." The word hung there, heavy. This was different from before. The mocking edge was gone. This was something else, a test. The crowd felt it too, the shift settling into the room. Roxanne stepped closer, lowering her voice again. "Here's the deal," she said. "You sing with me. We end this clean. I'll say something nice about you. You walk off a legend. Or," she paused, "you don't, and this turns ugly." Caleb listened. He didn't interrupt. He looked at her, really looked this time, and saw the fear she'd been hiding behind jokes and noise. Not fear of him. Fear of losing control in front of people who had always handed it to her. "I'm not here for a deal," he said quietly. Roxanne's jaw tightened. "Then why are you here?" Caleb took a breath. "Because people are watching." The band waited. The crowd buzzed, caught on the edge. Roxanne laughed once, sharp. Fine, she said. Do it your way. She nodded to the band. The music swelled, fuller this time, wrapping the stage in sound. Roxanne entered strong, her voice polished, confident. The crowd cheered out of reflex. Caleb waited, counting beats in his head, letting her take the first verse. He didn't rush. He didn't force it. When he came in, it wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. His voice slid into the song like it had always been there, steady and grounded, lifting the melody instead of fighting it. The crowd reacted instantly, the sound changing shape again, sharper, more focused. Roxanne glanced at him, surprise flashing before she covered it. She pushed harder, raising her volume, stretching phrases. Caleb stayed where he was, holding the line clean, letting the song breathe. The difference was clear now. Not better, not worse, just honest versus forced. The chorus hit, and the crowd sang along, thousands of voices filling the space. Roxanne smiled wide, playing to them. Caleb sang softer, letting the room carry the weight. The contrast landed hard. Midway through the song, Roxanne leaned in again. You could have all of this, she said under the music. You don't have to go back to scrubbing floors. Caleb didn't look at her. I don't scrub, he said. I clean. The words slipped out before he thought about them. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The people closest heard. A ripple moved outward. Roxanne missed her next entry. It was small, almost nothing. But the crowd caught it. Caleb didn't adjust. He stayed steady, holding his part, letting the gap show. Roxanne recovered fast, but the moment was gone. The song carried on without her lead. As the final chorus approached, Roxanne's breathing grew heavy. Her eyes darted, searching for footing. Caleb felt the shape of the ending again, that quiet pull in his chest. He thought of his boys. He thought of the night he chose a different life and never explained it. He sang the last line like a promise kept. The song ended. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then the arena exploded. Not scattered this time. Unified. Loud. Real. People stood, shouting, clapping, pointing at the stage. Caleb lowered his head, overwhelmed, the sound crashing over him. Roxanne stood beside him, her microphone lowered, her face pale. She leaned close one last time. This isn't over, she said, her voice tight. Caleb looked up, meeting her eyes. It is for me, he said. The crowd roared again, and as the lights burned and the noise climbed, Caleb realized that whatever came next would test him in ways this stage never could. The arena kept roaring even after the last note faded, but the sound no longer felt wild. It felt settled, like a decision had been made and accepted by the room. Caleb stood still as the noise washed over him, his ears ringing, his chest tight, his legs heavy like they might give out if he moved too fast. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He was trying to stay upright inside a moment that had grown bigger than his body could hold. Roxanne didn't bow. She didn't wave. She stood frozen beside him, her microphone hanging loose, her shoulders stiff. The lights stayed locked on them both, bright and unforgiving. When she finally moved, it wasn't toward the crowd. It was away from him. She took 2 sharp steps back, her heels striking hard, and turned her face slightly so the cameras wouldn't catch what had crept into her expression. The conductor lowered his hands slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement might shatter something. The band stopped playing altogether. No filler music rushed in. No planned transition saved the moment. The arena filled itself with reaction alone. Caleb took 1 step toward the edge of the stage. The crowd reacted instantly, cheering louder, as if the movement confirmed something they needed to see. Phones lifted higher. People shouted his name. He didn't know how they learned it so fast, but it rang out from every direction now. Caleb! Caleb! The sound hit him from all sides, dizzying. He raised one hand, not to wave, but to steady himself. The noise softened just a little, enough for him to breathe. He looked out across the crowd, really looked this time. Faces blurred together under the lights, but the emotion was clear. This wasn't about music anymore. It was about watching power slip and truth stand in its place. Roxanne lifted her mic suddenly, her voice cutting through. All right, she said, forcing a laugh. That's enough. A few boos answered her. She nodded stiffly like she expected them. We're done here. She turned toward the band. Take 5. No one moved. The conductor hesitated, then shook his head once, small and firm. The band stayed still. The message was clear without words. The moment no longer belonged to her. Roxanne's face tightened. She turned back toward Caleb, her eyes sharp. You think this makes you something? She asked, her voice carrying now, stripped of softness. You think these people care about you tomorrow? Caleb didn't answer right away. He felt the question land, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest in a way she didn't intend. He thought of tomorrow mornings filled with routine. He thought of cleaning supplies and quiet halls. He thought of his boys waiting at home. He looked back at her, calm. I don't need them to, he said. The crowd reacted again, louder this time, approval rolling forward in waves. Roxanne scoffed and turned away sharply, signaling to someone off stage. Security moved in closer, forming a loose line near the steps. The stage manager appeared at her side, speaking fast into her ear. She shook him off. Behind them, the big screen flickered again. This time, it wasn't a replay of the song. It was the live crowd feed. Faces in the front rows, eyes wide, mouths open, hands clapping. The image pulled back, capturing the scale of it all. Thousands standing, thousands reacting. No edits, no filters, just proof. A murmur spread through the arena as people realized what they were seeing. The system had shifted. The story was no longer controlled from the stage. Roxanne stared at the screen, her lips parting slightly. Turn that off, she snapped. The words were sharp, desperate. No one responded. Caleb watched her shoulders rise and fall fast. He saw it clearly now, the cracks she couldn't hide. This wasn't about embarrassment. This was about exposure. The kind that didn't fade when the lights went down. The crowd started chanting again, his name rolling louder, steadier. Caleb felt his throat tighten. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't asked for it, but he also knew running from it now would feel like lying. He took another step toward the edge of the stage, then stopped. He turned back toward the crowd and lifted both hands slowly, palms open. The chant softened. The room leaned in. He didn't speak into a microphone. He didn't need one. Thank you, he said, his voice carrying just enough. But I've got to go. The simplicity of it landed hard. The crowd reacted with a mix of cheers and groans, disappointment and respect tangled together. He nodded once, then turned fully toward the steps. Roxanne watched him go, her expression unreadable now. She lifted her mic one last time. This isn't the end, she said, her voice tight, aimed more at herself than him. You don't just walk out like this. Caleb didn't turn back. As he reached the steps, a security guard held up a hand, hesitating. You okay? The guard asked quietly. Caleb nodded. Yeah. The guard stepped aside. The moment Caleb's foot hit the floor off stage, the sound from the arena dulled, like a door closing on a storm. The lights behind him flared brighter as Roxanne moved back toward center stage, trying to reclaim space that no longer wanted her. The crowd noise shifted again, restless now, unsure what to do without him there. Backstage was chaos. Crew members spoke over each other. Phones buzzed nonstop. Someone shoved a water bottle into Caleb's hand. He took it without thinking, his fingers numb. A stage manager grabbed his arm gently, steering him away from the immediate rush. You need to stay here, the man said. At least for a minute. Caleb nodded, leaning against a wall. He took a sip of water, then another, his hands finally steadying. The sound of the crowd still filtered through, loud but distant now. Down the hall, a monitor played the live broadcast. Caleb caught a glimpse of himself on screen, standing under the lights, calm and still while the world moved around him. He looked older on the screen, worn in a way that felt earned. The stage manager glanced at the monitor, then back at Caleb. You just broke the internet, he said under his breath. Caleb shook his head. I didn't break anything. The man laughed softly. Yeah, he said. You did. A shout echoed from the stage. Roxanne's voice raised and sharp. The crowd answered back. Louder. The tension hadn't left. It had just changed shape. Caleb felt a pull in his chest again. A quiet understanding settling in. This wasn't finished. Not for her. Not for him. What happened out there would travel fast, faster than he could walk away from it. He knew that now. A phone buzzed in his pocket. He froze. Slowly he reached in and pulled it out. Notifications stacked on the screen, one after another. Messages, missed calls, alerts. He didn't open any of them. He didn't need to. The weight of it pressed in without words. He slid the phone back into his pocket and leaned his head against the wall, closing his eyes. He thought of Noah and Eli. He thought of getting home. He thought of explaining none of this and all of it at the same time. Out on the stage, the noise spiked again as Roxanne shouted something he couldn't hear. A few moments later, a chant broke out. Not his name this time, but something harsher, something pointed. Caleb opened his eyes. He understood then that the truth had fully crossed into the open. There was no putting it back. And as the sound surged and the night tipped towards something even bigger, Caleb knew the hardest part wasn't what he'd just faced under the lights. It was what came after, when the noise faded and the world expected him to decide what to do with the space he'd been given. The noise from the arena didn't follow Caleb out into the night, but its echo stayed lodged in his chest as he walked through the employee exit and into the parking lot. The air was cooler here, heavy with the smell of oil and damp concrete. His boots scraped softly against the ground, the sound small compared to what he'd just left behind. For the first time in hours, no lights tracked his movement. No cameras waited. It felt unreal, like stepping out of a storm into a quiet street where no one knew rain had fallen. His phone vibrated again. Caleb stopped walking. The screen lit up in his hand, crowded with names he didn't recognize and numbers he didn't know. Missed calls stacked on top of each other. Messages poured in faster than he could read them. He locked the phone without opening anything and slid it back into his pocket, his hand lingering there a moment longer than needed. The pull to look was strong, stronger than he expected, but he kept walking. Inside his car, the silence pressed in. He sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, his hands resting on his thighs, his breathing slow and deliberate. He stared through the windshield at the dark stretch of road ahead and let the moment settle. This was usually the part of his night where he replayed conversations, planned the next morning, worried about bills. Tonight, his mind felt blank in a way that scared him more than noise ever had. He drove home carefully, every red light feeling longer than usual. At one stop, he glanced at his phone again. More notifications. News alerts now. He recognized a few headlines without opening them. His name, the words janitor and arena sitting too close together. He exhaled and focused on the road. When he pulled into the apartment complex, the building looked the same as always. Dim lights, peeling paint, a quiet that came from people already asleep because they had to be up early. Caleb parked and sat there for a second, grounding himself. This place had held him together when everything else fell apart. Fame, whatever that meant, didn't live here. Inside, the apartment was dark except for the small lamp in the living room. Caleb kicked off his boots and moved quietly down the hall. He paused at the doorway to the bedroom, watching his boys sleep. Noah lay on his side, one arm flung over a pillow. Eli slept on his back, mouth slightly open, chest rising steady. The sight loosened something tight in Caleb's chest. He stood there longer than he meant to, memorizing the calm. In the kitchen, he poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, finally unlocking his phone. The screen exploded to life. Messages from strangers, clips sent by people he barely knew. A voicemail notification blinked at the top, marked urgent. He ignored it and scrolled. Offers came fast and bold. Managers, agents, labels. Words like opportunity and once in a lifetime repeated in different fonts. Promises stacked high, each one louder than the last. Caleb felt the old pull, the one he thought he'd buried years ago. Not the hunger for attention, but the promise of relief. The idea that things could get easier all at once. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a name he recognized. His sister. He answered before it stopped ringing. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "I'm home," Caleb said. "The boys are asleep." A breath released on the other end. "I saw it," she said. "Everyone did." Caleb closed his eyes. "I didn't plan any of it." "I know," she replied. "That's why people care." After they hung up, Caleb sat at the small kitchen table and stared at the screen again. One message stood out, quieter than the rest. It wasn't flashy, no bold promises, just a few lines explaining who they were and why they were reaching out. A nonprofit, music therapy, children dealing with loss. They weren't offering money, they were offering purpose. Caleb read it twice. His phone buzzed again. Another call. He let it ring. The quiet choice settled heavy but right in his chest. He thought of classrooms instead of stages, of small voices instead of crowds, of singing low and steady so no one felt pushed. He typed a short reply to the nonprofit and set the phone down. By morning, the world had changed. Caleb woke to the sound of his phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. He shut it off and focused on getting the boys ready for school. Noah talked about a spelling test. Eli complained about cereal. Life pressed forward, stubborn and ordinary. When Caleb walked them to the bus stop, a neighbor stared a little too long, then smiled like they shared a secret. Back inside, Caleb finally checked the voicemail marked urgent. It was from Roxanne's team. The voice was smooth, practiced. Apologies wrapped in careful language. An invitation to talk things out. A mention of mutual benefit. Caleb deleted it without replying. The internet kept moving without him. Clips spread, commentary piled up. Some praised him, some doubted him. Stories twisted and retwisted. He didn't correct any of them. He went to work that night like he always did, pushing his cart through empty halls, the echo of his steps grounding him. At one point, his supervisor pulled him aside. "You don't have to be here," the man said quietly. Caleb nodded. "I know, but you still came." Caleb shrugged. "It's my job." Later that week, he stood in a small room with mismatched chairs and a cheap keyboard against the wall. A handful of kids sat in front of him, eyes cautious, curious. He sang softly, showing them how to breathe, how to let sound out without forcing it. No cameras, no applause, just presence. That night, after the boys were asleep again, Caleb sat on the couch and finally opened one of the news articles. It mentioned Roxanne entering rehab. It mentioned her canceled shows. It mentioned him only in passing now, like a moment already moving toward memory. His phone buzzed one last time before he set it down for good. A new message. Short, from an unknown number. "This isn't finished." Caleb stared at the words, his expression calm. He didn't reply. He turned off the phone, leaned back, and closed his eyes. Knowing some stories don't end when the noise fades. They wait. The morning came in quiet, the kind that didn't ask permission. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains and landed across the living room floor, cutting a soft line between yesterday and whatever came next. Caleb stood at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug, listening to the steady hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic waking up outside. For once, his phone sat untouched on the counter, dark and silent, like it finally understood it wasn't in charge. Noah patted in first, rubbing his eyes, hair sticking up on one side. "Dad," he said, squinting toward the window, "is it gonna rain today?" Caleb glanced outside. The sky was clear. "Doesn't look like it," he said. Eli followed a few seconds later, dragging his blanket behind him. "Good," he said. "I don't like wet shoes." Caleb smiled, small and real. He poured cereal, cut fruit, moved through the routine like he always had. The world outside might have shifted, but inside these walls, life still ran on simple needs. Breakfast, school, getting out the door on time. At the bus stop, a woman across the street raised her phone, then lowered it when she saw his face. Another parent nodded at him, eyes curious but respectful. No one said anything. Caleb appreciated that more than he could explain. After the bus pulled away, he stood there for a moment longer, hands in his pockets, breathing in the cool air. This was the part of the day he usually rushed through. Today he let it stretch. Later in the small community room, where folding chairs scraped against the floor and a keyboard leaned slightly to the left, Caleb sat with the kids from the program. Their voices were shy at first, uneven, breaking in places. He didn't correct them right away. He let them hear themselves. He showed them how to breathe before making sound, how to stop when it hurt, how to start again without fear. One boy asked, "Were you scared when you sang on that big stage?" Caleb thought about it. "Yeah," he said, "but being scared doesn't mean you stop." The kids nodded like that made sense. Outside that room, the world kept spinning. Interviews he didn't take, deals he didn't answer, stories written by people who didn't know him, filling in gaps with guesses. He let them. He learned quickly that not every version of you deserves your energy. One afternoon, he came home to find a package at the door. No return address. Inside was a simple note and a pair of new work gloves. The note read, "For when you clean and when you teach, nothing else." Caleb folded it and placed it in the drawer beside the old ones. Roxanne's name faded from the headlines slowly, then all at once. Rehab turned into silence. Silence turned into absence. Caleb didn't celebrate that. He didn't feel proud of it either. It just was. Weeks passed, then months. One evening after the boys were asleep, Caleb sat on the couch with a guitar resting against his knee. He strummed softly, not practicing, not performing, just letting sound exist in the room. Noah stirred and wandered out, sleepy-eyed. He sat beside his dad without speaking. Eli followed, curling up on the other side. "You're singing quiet again," Eli said. Caleb nodded. "That's how I like it." Noah leaned his head against Caleb's arm. "You don't have to be loud for people to hear you," he said, repeating something he'd picked up somewhere along the way. Caleb felt his throat tighten. "That's right." The phone buzzed once from the kitchen. Caleb didn't move. He let it ring until it stopped. The moment didn't need anything else added to it. Somewhere out there, people were still watching that clip, still arguing, still choosing sides. But here, in this room, the story had settled where it belonged. Caleb didn't become famous. He didn't stop cleaning floors either. He kept teaching kids how to breathe through sound. He kept walking his boys to the bus stop. He kept choosing the kind of life that didn't need a spotlight to feel solid. And if you're still here, still listening, let me say this clearly. Stories like this don't happen to make someone look big. They happen to remind us that dignity doesn't need permission. If this story meant something to you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story that carries hope, strength, and a second chance. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what part of this stayed with you. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear tonight. Because somewhere, right now, someone is standing in the dark, wondering if staying true is worth the cost. And this story exists to say, it is.